Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. After the video where I talked about the Israeli Operation Gideon's Chariot, several viewers reached out to me. They said that there is a feeling that Israel's actions, in my interpretation, seem to be wrong. I even get the impression that I am an opponent of Israel. Let me clarify my position. First of all, at one time, the Arabs specifically organized refugee camps and did not accept those who fled from the territory that is now Israel. Arabs who fled, mostly because of rumors about the bloodthirstiness of the Jews. There, so to speak, all sorts of rumors began to spread about Christian babies' blood, and that they had Muslim babies' blood, so to speak, which was supposedly mixed into matzo and things like that. That is, bloodthirsty Jews, they fled from them. So these were Jordanian Arabs, that is, so to speak, all of this was Transjordan, and neither Jordan itself nor Egypt wanted to take them in. A center of hatred was carefully organized on the border of Israel, and so to speak, they decided what to call it, and they created it. The main occupation of the residents of Gaza and the West Bank is, for payment from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or Iran, to try to kill or at least injure Israelis. They are told that all their troubles are because of the Jews, and as soon as they cleanse their holy land of these infidels. By the way, it is significantly more holy for the Jews than for the Arabs. Well, Muslim, but that's, so to speak, not important. They are told that this is their holy land and it must be cleansed of infidels. And as soon as this happens, then the life of the whole world and theirs, accordingly, will become absolutely wonderful. That is, they will live a beautiful, full, magnificent life as soon as they destroy all the Jews. And that means as long as there is someone who is willing to pay money for murder, they will keep killing. And there are always such people. Iran, Russia, Qatar, others, and Muslim, by the way, as well as European organizations, including the United Nations. So this plague can be eliminated, so to speak, as I understand it, in 3 cases. In 3 ways, yes. Let's put it this way. Until the complete destruction of 5 million Muslims, I don't know exactly how many live there. They say both in Gaza and on the West Bank. That's a made-up number to get more aid from the United Nations. I don't know, but the official figure is somewhere between 4.5 to 5 million people living in those 2 enclaves. That is, so to speak, you could completely wipe out all of this population. But I hope that everyone understands that the Jewish state will not do this. Here is the second question. The second option is re-education. That is, to convince those who provide the money to stop doing so and to change anti-Israeli propaganda to pro-Jewish. Well, let's say at least in those countries that surround Israel, emphasizing there the kinship of nations, peoples, religion, and history. This is probably possible to do, but most likely not in the near future. And still, so to speak, it's that generation or those generations who are living now. It will be difficult to rid them of that poison that they've already been infused with. And third, this means a significant reduction in the population of both enclaves, with the resettlement of residents to the nearest Arab countries. This is not a simple project, but it is technically feasible. That is, if the others are, so to speak. Well, let's say the first is impossible, the second is almost impossible. Then the third one is difficult, yes, but technically it is feasible. Well, of course, this combination of propaganda is even better. So the pro-Israeli plus the resettlement of Gaza today, and for the West Bank either resettlement in the future, or possibly the establishment of some kind of autonomy there with the possibility of monitoring for at least 10 years. Will Arabs, Jews, and Samaritans be able to live independently, that is, to provide for themselves with everything they need, to get rid of the ideology of death, destruction, and the like? The way Israel has existed since 1948, it's every 3 to 5 years. After being defeated, the neighbors rearm themselves and strike at the Jewish state. The destruction, let's say, of Iran's nuclear potential will lead to Iran lying low for 5 years, and then it will have enriched uranium, possibly produced not in Iran itself. But the bombs will be brought into Iran and, so to speak, mounted on missiles that are being developed there and are ready for action. And as for centrifuges, as they say when you already have bombs, what's the point of centrifuges anymore? Well, as they say, once you've lost your head, there's no point in crying over your hair. Something like that, yes. He himself doesn't cry. Something like that, yes. Returning to my video, what I wanted to convey to the viewer is that Israel has already been losing the information war to the Arabs for 4 or 5 decades. And when Israel doesn't work on communicating its position to the general public, let's say American citizens, then a completely different position is communicated to those very same broad masses of American citizens, because the other side is working on it. And we could lose the support of the most powerful and, in general, the only real friend we have in the world. They wrote that I didn't express my position, so to speak, that as if every time I need to state my position. Well, maybe if a few people felt that way, it's true, but my position is the following. There are almost no people who are born with hatred toward another nation. This hatred is instilled in people through propaganda. Let's put it this way. When Arabs dance in the streets over the killing of Israelis, that hatred has been instilled in them. Russians, by the way, also dance with joy when Georgians are killed. They used to kill Georgians after Georgia attacked Russia. So 4 million Georgians attacked 150 million Russians. That's why they dance then when Ukrainians are killed, even though Ukrainians, by the way, haven't done anything bad to them. Ukrainians also dance with joy when they hear how many people have been killed in Moscow, so to speak, by their strikes. Although I'm sure most of those killed and wounded didn't want to attack any Ukraine. And they rejoiced at the conquest of Crimea because it was drilled into their heads that they don't want to be killed. That Crimea was taken away from the fascists, that it was taken back from the fascists who had previously seized it from Russia. People were completely changed. Their way of thinking was replaced with something else. Most people in the world, they're just dumb. They can't analyze. They haven't learned to check things. They don't know history. They're not interested in anything except their own stomachs and sex organs. And there are a majority of such people, I would say, both in Arab countries and in Russia, in Israel, in Ukraine, in the United States of America, in Canada, in Uruguay. I'm sure that on the planet Nibiru, if there's a population there, the majority of them are dumb too. But you can crush bedbugs, you can probably poison ants, and you can catch hares in traps. And in China, by the way, they exterminated all the sparrows. That actually happened there. And in Europe, in the Middle Ages, they exterminated cats. But not the devil's messengers, as the church explained to us. Because of this, there was an avalanche. Hordes of mice and rats appeared, and fleas jumped onto them, which actually this Bacillus pestis, I think it's called, which carries the plague. And half of Europe died out. Well, about a third of Europe, half of England and Scotland. And what do I think needs to be done? We need to solve this problem. Around and around, every time, every 3 to 5 years, once again, maybe they'll manage to achieve something. If it's resettlement, if it's those who are resettled, and those who live in camps. Arabs cannot become normal, productive people, a normal, productive nation. They cannot be left in close proximity to Israel. It is impossible to quickly teach them to stop hating and killing, and then that's why, because they are nearby, it's a threat to all Israelis who live in their immediate proximity. By the way, the Arabs in Gaza, and actually in many countries of the Arab Muslim world, they don't just dance there. Their representatives enter kindergartens and shoot children, blow up cafes with young people and school children inside. They get on buses and press the detonation button. They were convinced that by dying and killing, taking the lives of non-believers, they would secure a sweet life in paradise. They grab Israelis who accidentally enter their neighborhood and throw them off rooftops. They cut open the bellies of pregnant women. We thought that only happened in the movies. They stuff Jewish babies into ovens and burn them there. They carve six-pointed stars on the backs of the prisoners. They carve. I can't take it anymore, yeah. A culture of hatred, death, and wild joy at the suffering of others, created in the Arab world, is not easily eradicated. That's what all this is for, said Arabov. We need to resettle to move them away. First, we need to find a place and arrange for them to be accepted. Second, we need to work with them so they understand they're being given a chance at a good life. And third, we need to level their half-destroyed camps to the ground so that they don't even have the thought of going back there, by filling in tunnels and weapon caches so they see there's nowhere to return to. A combination of this and the carrot regarding relocation. And it must be applied to separate the young Arabs who have been raised as killers from the Israelis, from the goal of killing them, and move them toward building their own lives, toward improving their own existence, so that they have the opportunity to make their lives better. And maybe after some time they will begin to live some kind of normal human life. This is my position. And also, if Israel does not explain to Americans what is happening, then Americans will have a position formed by Israel's enemies. Jews can live next to Arabs, but Arabs driven into a state of irrational hatred cannot live next to Jews. Whoever cannot must leave. And it's not just that Israel and Judea are, so to speak, the original, yes, that's the word I was looking for, the original land of the Jews. And it's not even about the fact that as a result of the genocide, half of the Jewish people were destroyed, and the world community allowed the remaining half to return to their historical homeland. The point is that two groups of people cannot coexist. At least for 80 years, they have not been able to do so. Moreover, one of the groups can live in peace with the other, but the second group just can't manage to do so. Actually, it doesn't really matter why. That's why those who can't live in peace must either be re-educated. They can create a lot of problems and take a lot of time during this period, or they can be taken away and separated. With those whom they so fiercely hate, whom, for the most part, they actually envy. Either a wall that cannot be climbed over, flown over, or tunneled under, which technically is probably impossible today, or relocation to a place from which they can no longer cause harm or commit murder. Very simple and clear, it seems to me. The position is simple and clear. Now all that's left is the easy part, to come up with how to implement this plan and start taking action. By the way, about Iran, Persians are one of the most intelligent and capable peoples on earth. Some people know how to sing, some know how to build assembly lines, but Persians know how to think. Iran under the Shah was an educated secular state. Iranians are not enemies of Israel, or originally of Jews, America, culture, or science. Iranians are slaves to those whom the President of the United States let into their country, Carter and his national security advisor, Brzezinski. The United States expelled the Shah and created conditions that forced the Shah to leave. And why did they do that? Now I will quote Brzezinski. To ignite a fire on the borders of the Soviet Union, a Muslim fire, that's what is meant. But the fire spread all over the world. In Iran, it is necessary to support the resistance movement of the mullahs. The idea is to deprive Iran of resources, to make it poor and powerless. Or another option, if Iran completely, so to speak, completely refuses any, so to speak, production of nuclear weapons. If it opens the country for inspections and stops the production of weapons of mass destruction, then Iran should be integrated into trade and commercial relations with the world. China, Iran's main sponsor, is losing its position because they have, in a way, started a trade war with us. There is a destruction of industry in China. Iran will sell less oil. The less China buys, the less Iran will be able to sell. China will start to reduce its investments in Iran. Along with the decline of China, the decline of Iran will begin. And maybe they are far from idiots and far from suicidal, and will want to become a friend, or at least not an enemy of the United States of America. But the most important thing will happen when, as a result of solving the gas problem, Israel and Saudi Arabia sign the Abraham Accords, and 1.2 billion Sunnis will start buying technologies from Israel. And at the same time, they will stop paying Jordanian Arabs for killing Israelis, the Jordanian Arabs who are today called Palestinians. For some reason, Iran will realize that from being once the most developed country in the region, it is starting to become the weakest, the most underdeveloped country. Here we are now. So, having talked about Israel, let's talk about Ukraine as well. Let me start by saying that Russia has mobilized on the territory of Ukraine. Daycare centers and hospitals, theaters where civilians were hiding. They tortured residents, they raped, killed girls, tortured and abused those taken captive. Russians crushed civilians with tanks and direct fire, shot at cars where families with children and elderly people were sitting. Russians looted homes, broke in and carried off washing machines, microwaves. From intercepted conversations with the families of servicemen, we learned how Russian soldiers boasted to their fiancés and mothers about how they raped and killed Ukrainians. Now let's move on to the situation after I said that, like a treble clef. Yes. From time to time, I get a barrage of hatred from Ukrainians if, God forbid, I suddenly say something that doesn't align with the general line of Ukraine with Ukrainian propaganda. Let's start with the long-gone days. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics collapsed. Ukraine was the second largest republic in terms of industrial capacity, producing steel, cast iron, iron ore, tractors, spacecraft, automobiles, equipment for power plants, had a powerful coal industry, oil, natural gas, chemical production, plastics, and synthetic materials, not to mention textiles, household goods, and food products. By the beginning of the military actions with the Russian Federation in 2014, Ukraine had already lost its military production and a significant part of its machine-building industry. For example, in 1990, Ukraine produced 52.7 million tons of steel, but in 2021, the year before the war, it was only 21.4 million tons of steel. That means the decrease was more than twofold, and this is despite the fact that steel is in demand around the world. The range of everything that Ukraine produces has narrowed, with a shift toward exporting raw materials. That is, instead of processing what we extract and what the land gives us, we don't use it ourselves. Ukraine is one of the two republics of the former Union of Soviet Socialist Republics that did not increase, but actually decreased its gross domestic product from 1990 to 2022. The other republic is Moldova, which is the same. Yes, even Georgia increased its gross domestic product, not to mention Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Kazakhstan, and so on. The main reason for the collapse of the military and civilian industries, according to experts, is the incredible, all-encompassing corruption, theft, and the transfer of funds abroad. In Ukraine, it means by the year 2008, it became clear that Russia was trying to expand its spheres of influence, but Ukraine did not start building up its army and defense industry. The main reason, according to experts, is widespread theft, practically the plundering of the country. In 2014, the annexation of Crimea took place. Ukraine did not have an army or military production and was unable to hold on to the peninsula. After the annexation of Crimea, it became clear that Russia would not stop there. Ukraine did not start building up its military industry, but some changes were made in the army. From 2014 to 2022, Ukraine was subjected to constant attacks by Russia, but because of the benefits of trade with Russia, it did not declare war on it and did not build a strong line of defense. And when it found out that in 4 months Russia was planning an attack, instead of mining all the approaches, it cleared the approaches to the border near Kyiv. Maybe I have incorrect information, but this is what is written in the media in different languages, including in Ukraine itself. In 2014, an agreement was signed with Russia, but neither side began to fulfill it. In 2015, Ukraine agreed to carry out a constitutional reform to change the unitary state into a federal one. Ukraine did not carry out the constitutional reform with the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, the so-called subjects of the Federation, meaning it broke its promise of constitutional reform, and in 1922. So, after the invasion, Ukraine and Russia again negotiated the terms for ending the war at its very beginning. Well, on the advice of the United States of America and Great Britain, Ukraine refused this peace agreement. Not having the latest in weaponry,
equipment for the army,
not having its own weapons production, Ukraine refused to comply with Russian demands. And what were those demands? Neutrality of Ukraine, refusal to join NATO, demilitarization, and recognition of the occupied territories. So now, Russia was not demanding the creation of a federal state where Luhansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic, so to speak, would enter as subjects, but was demanding recognition of them and Crimea as Russian. Now, entering the third round of negotiations, Russia is demanding to be given 4 regions and Crimea. Russia has not captured part of these territories. That is, from my point of view, Russia committed crimes by attacking Ukraine in 2014, then Donbass, and then the full-scale invasion. Russia committed countless crimes and is guilty of initiating the escalation of military actions. Ukraine, for its part, made several fatal mistakes, including the collapse of its industry and military industry, especially by not providing the country with proper security and by unwise, provocative diplomatic conduct, bluffing without having the defense that could support such a bluff. Instead of preparing, Ukrainians were plundering the country and hoping that someone, be it Ukraine, Europe, or the United States of America, would come and save them at the most critical moment. And now we have come to today. General Zaluzhny brilliantly described the situation. A new type of warfare, which includes artificial intelligence, drones, satellite communications, and similar technologies, allows you to dig in and defend effectively, but does not allow you to leave cover and attack to advance. Everyone who comes out is destroyed. That is, neither Russia is moving, so to speak, seriously forward. That is, he said it is moving forward. But it's not 100 kilometers in 3 days, it's 15 kilometers in a year and a half. And everyone who comes out, they get destroyed, right? And Russia can't do it effectively and quickly unless they put 500,000, 1 million soldiers there to capture, so to speak, Ukraine at that pace. And Ukraine can't move anywhere. So to speak, maybe just a little bit there, a little bit here, from the position that, Russia has already captured and is holding. And at the negotiations, said Rubio, Russia wants to get what they haven't captured, and it's unknown whether they'll be able to capture it. And at the negotiations, Ukraine wants Russia to clear the territory that Russia has captured, something Ukraine cannot do on its own. So everything has stopped. And every day they bomb each other. When they bomb, they kill. Russia makes bombs, rockets, and bullets itself, and buys them with the money that Europe pays it for gas. There was gas in Ukraine too, but they don't export it. Ukraine has to ask for help, which after 3 years they no longer want to give. Although they pretend, of course. Ways out of the situation. The first is that the opposition war continues. Russia has more bombs and missiles, so more Ukrainians are dying. Another year or a year and a half of shelling, and it's unclear where Ukraine will be able to find recruits to replace the killed and wounded. Russia is bringing cannon fodder from China, North Korea, Buryatia, and numerous outskirts of its empire. Ukrainians are dying every day. And slowly but surely, Russia will keep advancing until finally Ukraine runs out of strength to resist, and the whole country will probably end up occupied by Russia. Second, Russia gets 5 regions. A border is established between the countries. Mineral resource development begins in Ukraine. An international consortium ensures security, and Ukraine is being rebuilt within its reduced borders. Tens of billions of dollars are being invested in the development of industry, ports, power plants, railways, and mineral processing. Ukraine, reduced within its new borders, is being rebuilt with the help of the United States Development Fund. The role of oligarchs and corruption in the country is diminishing.
This is the second
option. It's not about what I like or don't like, it's just an option. And the third option. Ukraine invents the hyperboloid of engineer Garin. Either it makes contact with aliens, or magically persuades Trump to send the United States Army and, with the help of this miraculous weapon, drives Russian troops out of its territory. After that, the oligarchs return and take ownership of everything on and under the land in the territory of Ukraine. That is, the same life returns.
That was before.
But now, so to speak, in a ruined Ukraine and with even more power in the hands of the oligarchs than before. In other words, Russia's takeover of Ukraine is slow, and another 20, 50, or even 100,000 Ukrainians have perished. Or urgently.
To stop the war.
To save everything possible, and with Trump's help, to achieve the best possible outcome from the very bad situation that is possible. Unfortunately, the choice is between bad, very bad, and terrible. Unfortunately, this doesn't look like justice. Unfortunately, justice is usually found in kindergartens. When they are told fairy tales, they never fight with each other. And in Hollywood movies, completely different rules apply in real life. Russia attacked. Russia is the aggressor according to all United Nations laws. All United Nations Economic and Social Council laws, honesty and decency, Russia must be punished. The problem is that there is no one to punish it. Ukraine cannot, Europe cannot, and does not want to. Well, they are happy to talk. But at the same time, they pay Russia for gas because gas in Russia is cheaper than in other places. And the fact that this fuels the war in Ukraine, it's like they just look the other way at this time. The United States of America is on a completely different continent and is almost bankrupt at the moment. The United States of America doesn't have money for Ukraine. It doesn't even have enough for its own needs. But first of all, if they do get any money, they'll spend it on their own needs, and only then on Africa, Asia, or Ukraine. There are plenty of Americans here who care much more and worry more about what's happening in Congo than about what's happening in Ukraine. But there's no one to save Ukraine. And now, finally, the moment has come when the country's leadership, knowing that help won't come, they've already been waiting for 3 years. It seems it should become clear. They have to decide whether they choose the slow capture of all of Ukraine by the enemy's superior forces. Maybe in a year, maybe in 3, maybe in 5, or maybe in 8. or take advantage of the fact that the world is still interested in Ukraine for now. They might stop soon and save what's left, people and territory. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't live there, my closest relatives don't live there, and most of my friends and acquaintances have already left. So it's definitely not for me to decide. What I did was, first of all, I answered a bunch of questions that people asked me. Apparently, you have to give each person a detailed answer. So right now, I tried to give a detailed answer about my positions regarding the two places where wars are currently happening. And wars are terrible. Naturally, during war, terrible things always happen, but when savages are fighting, it's even more frightening.
So to decide,
Not even those who ran away and are now sitting in New Jersey or in Germany, talking about how not an inch there and so on and so forth. Their children are already studying in a completely different place. Their relatives go to Russian-Ukrainian food stores in Hamburg. But it should be decided by those who are there on the battlefield and those who sent their own to the battlefield, and no one else. Whatever they decide, that's what will happen.